Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on Life. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. See, during the festival of Sukkot, in the times of the Holy Temple, there was a great observance which brought with it a tremendous celebration, as I'll describe in a moment. And this surrounded the, quote, drawing of water. Let me explain. You see, in the daily offerings, there was also a libation of wine that accompanied the offering. And at the corner of the altar, there was a special hollow pipe. Actually, there were two, but the one that was used all the time was like a bowl, and it ended with a little pipe on the bottom, and down there they poured the libations for the particular offerings in the morning and in the afternoon, the daily regimen. Now, during the festival of Sukkot, they added to that a libation which consisted of water that they drew from the shiluach, from a special stream of water the night before. And during the entire night, there was tremendous celebration of joy, of singing and dancing, accompanied by live music in the whole plaza of the Temple Mount. In fact, the Talmud describes in detail how the greatest of the sages would dance and rejoice and even do acrobatics and all kinds of juggling of torches, fire torches and things like that, all expressions of joy. And then in the morning, when they did the morning offering, in addition to the wine libation, as I said, they would also pour the water. Now, it's interesting that this observance is not actually mentioned explicitly in the Torah. So I can't give you a reference, a place where it's mentioned, because it's not. Rather, it is a tradition that was passed down from Moses all the way down throughout the generations. In fact, this is referred to as halacha leMoshe miSinai, which means this is a law, literally translated a law, a tradition to Moses directly from Sinai, directly from God. And that has its own reason and explanation as to why it's not written in the Torah. We're not going to get into it. But I want to focus on this great joy of the water aspect of things. What does this mean? Why did this generate? Why did this bring out such great joy? In fact, to the extent that the Talmud makes the following statement. The Talmud says, quote, whoever has not seen the joy of the drawing of the water has not seen real joy in his life. In other words, the Talmud saying that this was the ultimate joy. What is this all about? What does this mean? Now, of course, we do know that the, quote, judgment for water takes place during the festival of Sukkot. In other words, on Rosh Hashanah, the entire world was judged. On Rosh Hashanah, there was a judgment and a decision made for each and every of God's creatures, you and me and everything else in the world. However, the particular allocations for water, which really means for vitality and nutrients, especially for the ground, especially for drinking, and so on and so forth, that allocation is particularly judged and decided during the festival of Sukkot. So that's one reason, which is a great enough reason, for why the water generates such great celebration. But there's something more esoteric here. Let's examine what really is the difference between wine and water. What does it represent? Well, anybody knows anything about wine. Wine has a lot of character. Wine has a lot of personality. Wine has taste. Wine has, like I said, character. It has flavor. Wine is like a whole entity in itself. It's a whole life in itself. Anyone that knows wine and goes deeper and deeper into it, it's a whole world in itself. In other words, wine represents sophistication. It's a sophisticated thing. Wine represents understanding. Understanding is very important. And in the typical mode of things, one needs to understand. One needs to appreciate. In serving God, we can't just do it like robots. God wants us to study Torah. God wants us to understand. He wants us to appreciate, so we have a much greater involvement. So we have a much greater attachment and excitement in what we're doing. However, on Sukkot, we celebrate the aspect of water. Water has no taste. Water in itself is the most unsophisticated thing. However, water is the most fundamental thing. Water gives life to everything. In fact, a person can survive for a more lengthy period of time without food, without sleep perhaps, but you cannot do that without water. You need water. Water represents the fundamental acceptance, that fundamental subservience to God, which goes beyond any other understanding, which goes beyond any whatsoever sophistication. And this is equal by the most greatest scholar and by the greatest simpleton. Everybody has to have it. That basic characteristic of water has to be in each and every one of us. And that is the focus. That is the main celebration of Sukkot. Remember the idea, the concept of unity. Everybody comes together, from the greatest scholar to the simplest servant of God. Everybody together has something to celebrate. Because at the end of the day, with the greatest sophistication a human being may have, he or she is still a human being. He or she is so disproportionately let smaller than God, and will never get to fully understand godliness. There's only that much we can understand, and that much is really not even scratching the surface if you really think about the enormity of godliness. And therefore, when it comes to that aspect of things, the wine aspect, which is necessary, over there's tremendous difference between one and another. Certainly, the greatest scholar, even though they are disproportionately distant from God in terms of really fully understanding godliness, but still their understanding gives them so much more excitement and appreciation of what they're doing versus the simpleton who knows nothing, who has no capacity to understand, doesn't even know where to begin. That's true. But when it comes to the fundamental, the water aspect of things, when it comes to the fundamental subservience to God, the acceptance of God's sovereignty, of God being in charge and us being his servants, there everyone is equal. And that is cause for celebration. And that is actually the prerequisite to everything. Because if one approaches it only from the aspect of wine, it may look good in the moment. It may seem fantastic. Wow, look how much they understand godliness. Look how much they appreciate it. And that's why they're observing to the extent that they are. But there's great danger there. Because if everything is built, if everything is founded on one's appreciation, then there is a great danger lurking. What happens when they cease to understand something? What happens when they have a difficulty, a challenge with appreciating a certain aspect of things? They're not going to observe it. There's great danger. What happens if their mind suddenly tells them otherwise? If their intellect directs them in another direction? But when you have the approach, the water approach, the absolute basic subservience to God, which is your lifeline, and you begin from there, that's where you know that regardless of your understanding or not, regardless of your appreciation of things or not, you will continue being a subservient and dedicated servant of God. And that's the cause of celebration. And that's the message of Sukkot.